Are you a Final Fantasy XIV hoarder? Does it look like your inventory's bursting at the seams? Maybe your catgirl retainers are breaking their backs from something other than those 100s you gave them. Or is your glamour dresser packed so tight that it's about to spill out all over your room? You don't want to just fix this problem by sweeping it under the rug with another retainer off the MOG station, right? For the longest time, I've had a hoarding problem, but I've finally come up with a method to fix it. Let me show you how I fixed my hoarding problem. Hold on, it wasn't exactly solved. I always find a way to ruin it, but it's an improvement, okay? That's the important part. Let's start with the biggest problem for most Final Fantasy XIV players, Glamour Storage. We all know Glamour is the true endgame, but it's also the biggest killer when it comes to space. Your glamour dressers or retainers are probably maxed out by this issue more than any other, because if you're like me, you want to collect every single piece of glamour in the whole game. But for real, what happens when you really need that specific choker from the Eden's Promise raids, right? We can't go throwing that away. We'd have to go farm it all over again. So we need to start here. Make sure to check your retainers, glamour dresser, and inventory for all the things that I'm about to go through. Before we get to the actual cleaning, I have one major recommendation to get the most out of some of the items that you'll be removing. Please don't just throw away items that can be turned in for expert deliveries. You can obtain a ton of different useful items like emotes, chocobo bardings, and other various items that you can use or sell. For example, there are a bunch of Realm Reborn materials that can be sold on the market board like coke, sheelite, and more that are utilized for airships and submarines that are always on demand. Other items that might be useful are venture tokens for your retainers or material containers for an RNG chance at mounts and minions from the corresponding expansions. Now that that's taken care of, let's get to actually cleaning up that dirty inventory. Check out if any of your glamours can be stored within the armoire. That's an easy thing to check because every piece of gear that can be stored here within the armoire has this little icon here on the tooltip. Some of the gear that can be stored within the armoire is the seasonal gear, a Realm Reborn artifact gear, MOG station gear, some of the event gear, and also most Final Fantasy XIV collaboration gear. The only downside is you lose the ability to dye items within the armoire, so I make sure to store only items that I do not currently have expensive dyes applied to. Keep in mind that most dyes are easy to obtain again. Some dyes are bought from city NPCs. Some dyes are crafted at level 30 with easy to obtain gatherables. Some dyes are buyable when you reach a specific rank in Realm Reborn ally societies. Some you can buy from tokens in content like Island Sanctuary and Ishgard Restoration scripts and feats. And last, consider the price of the dyes on the market board. Maybe some of them are cheap enough where you can buy them again later. Not all the rare dyes are expensive in most markets because they're not as frequently used. The second thing to check out in your glamour dresser is if any of the glamours can be reobtained through an NPC within the world. A quick way to know this is hovering over an item and checking if it says shop selling price. This means there's an NPC somewhere in the world selling it. I won't tell you what to do with your money, but if any item has this, I always get rid of it, unless I am currently using it or plan to use it soon. You can easily reobtain items like this pending you don't mind paying the cost. One of the major NPCs that sells items like this is the Calamity Salvager. These NPCs are easy to find within each of the starting cities of Limsa, Gridania, and Ul'dah. Oftentimes, a lot of the gear that you obtain from the MSQ, side quests, and achievements can be found here. For example, you might have thrown away the gear that Stormblood, Shadowbringers, Endwalker, or Dawntrail initial jobs give you here. That'd be like Viper or Gunbreaker. These can be reobtained at the Calamity Salvager. I find it better just to throw away those items rather than storing them within my glamour dresser if I'm not currently using them or would use them anytime soon. Similarly, are you currently storing any of your artifact armor from the Shadowbringers, Endwalker, or Dawntrail expansions? All of the artifact armor from those expansions can be reobtained at the associated NPC for each expansion for free. Another set of NPCs I hope you're not forgetting is the replica vendors for relics. You'll find a Realm Reborn Zeta Relic replicas with Drake in the North Shroud, the Heavensward Anima Relic replicas with the Restoration node at Aziz's Law, the Stormblood Eureka relic replicas with Stalehander in Kugane, the Shadowbringers Bojin relic replicas with the Regina in Gangos, and finally the Endwalker Mandeville relic replicas with the House Mandeville vendor in Razet Hand. Keep in mind, if you're checking this video out after Dawntrail or any future expansions, the replica vendors will normally tend to be located near NPCs that you're turning in your relic quests at. The only exception for this is for the Eureka relics because the NPC is located near where you enter Eureka. Let's move on to the final NPC to take into consideration, the Sundry Splendors. The Sundry Splendors tend to be hanging out near Aetherites of the associated cities of the past expansions. They trade gear for Poetic Tombstones for Discipline of War and Magic classes, and Crafter Scripts for Discipline of the Hand and Discipline of the Land classes. You need to evaluate for yourself if you're willing to part with the gear related to Poetics or Crafter Scripts, but they're fairly easy to come by. So I tend to get rid of the related gear unless I'm using them actively. Now onto dungeon and raid gear. This is a bit more complicated of a topic, and it depends on what you can easily refarm and what you can't. I have a general thought process that goes into this, so I'll kind of lay it on you. 1. Can I solo this raid or dungeon within a reasonable amount of time for the item that I need? Keep in mind, even if the raid or dungeon is low level, there might be an instant kill mechanic that will block you from being able to actually finish it solo. You don't want a situation where you'll need to gather more people again to obtain this piece of gear. Most of the Binding Coil of Bahamut and Alexander raids can be soloed by level 100 jobs, with some of the Omega and Eden raids being soloable with a high level of difficulty. And most dungeons before the current expansion can be soloed, though the more recent ones take a bit longer, so I would keep that in mind as well. Consider which job you're going to be using and what tools it has to stay alive or kill the boss. And if you're not sure, make sure to test it out before you throw any piece of gear out. I never throw away any gear that I am unsure of that I'll actually be able to reobtain myself easily. I don't want to be throwing together another group of people just to get one specific piece of gear that I'm going to miss. 2. Do not throw away 24-man alliance gear. This one's pretty simple and follows some of the previous rules. For the 24-man alliance raids, you have to make 3 separate parties to even enter. That means you need 1 person per party, and that means you cannot solo them. I would strongly advise, do not throw any of these items out for that fact alone. It would be so frustrating to just throw away that one piece, and then you have to go back and get it. Number 3. For a dungeon, consider how deep in a dungeon that gear is before you potentially throw it away. I strongly recommend looking at the lodestone at which boss and treasure chest drops the associated piece that you are considering throwing away. Keep in mind that there is always one boss and one chest that can drop the same piece of equipment. You also don't want a situation where you need to spend 15 to 20 minutes clearing the way to solo a boss, and then the chest has RNG that will give you the wrong drop, and then you have to restart the dungeon for another chance. 4. Is the piece of gear from a leveling or expert dungeon? This is a huge factor to consider. When it's a leveling dungeon, you are guaranteed at the end of the dungeon to obtain one random piece of gear that is associated with your current job. If you already have the piece of gear, you will never reobtain that same piece of gear in your inventory. So you can use this to your advantage when you're cleaning out your retainers and dresser. So sometimes I'll keep a partial set of dungeon gear to pull out from my retainer or glamour dresser to force the new piece that I want if I need it at the end of the dungeon. Unfortunately, this is not the case for expert dungeons, so it could just take longer to obtain pieces from there because it's complete RNG. Let's move on to the latest glamour storage feature, outfit glamours. You're either going to find outfit glamours either completely useless in some cases and an absolute godsend in others. The negative side of outfit glamours is you cannot dye the whole set and you cannot dye an individual piece as an outfit glamour. This is a huge warning. Do not overwrite your expensive dyes. If you place an item with jet black dye on it within an outfit glamour, you're going to be on your knees begging for forgiveness to the glamour gods. So let's try to get the most out of your outfit glamours while also being extremely careful not to ruin your existing dyes. To check if a piece can even be part of an outfit glamour, look for the icon here. Once you click that icon, a window will pop up and show you which other pieces are part of the outfit glamour set. You'll want to round up all the level 1 glamour sets that you can find pending you're following the die rules. Once you're done with that, try to build as many sets together as you can. One great thing you can try to do is collect full sets of glamour that you haven't previously. Another warning to keep in mind, you'll need to make sure that all items in the set are NQ or HQ. If they're not, you won't be able to make a glamour outfit. I know these restrictions sound bad, but I promise you that without even finishing my own sets, I freed up over 100 spaces just from outfit glamours. Hopefully they'll expand this feature to add all sets of gear in the future and also give a solution for dyes. Because at that point, we might finally have a full glamour catalog. Now, for the final thing to keep in mind for glamour and also works for other items in general. Do you have duplicate pieces? This is easy to check with either the item search command followed by the piece of gear's name, in quotation marks if it's not clear for multiple words, or just right click on an item and click search for the item. From your chat box, you'll be given a full list of items that match the name and the amount of item that you have. In the case of gear, I would highly recommend disposing of any duplicates unless you have a reason to keep multiple pieces. A good reason might be is if you have expensive dye on multiple pieces of gear. That's definitely the case for me with multiple Miqo'te loincloths. I cannot get enough of Miqo'te short skirts. I mean, it's just nice to have a bit of variety, right? Now, for all the other equipment, it's your retainers and inventory. With the item search command, I would recommend going through each stackable item and making sure that they're all together on one retainer. You'd be surprised how many item stacks you might be duplicating across multiple retainers. One feature of the retainers that's going to be a massive help with this is entrust duplicates. When clicked, it will check all the items in your inventory versus the current retainer's inventory. If any of them matches, then it will show them on the list and you can select which ones you'd like to transfer to the retainer. This might be a little annoying at first, but if you can categorize your retainers to know which ones have stackable materials, you might be able to just drop on by regularly and hit this button to handle the stacks for you. Continuing on to materia, this one is a little bit complicated, so I'm going to try to simplify it down. First, I am not worrying about the goblins in Central Thanalan. I understand that you can use these to upgrade materia, but honestly, I believe it is only useful if you're taking the previous expansion's materia and hoping for a crafting or gathering materia right at the start of the expansion to sell on the mark board, because you can ultimately just buy materia through various means in the expansion, be it scripts or content that's delivered later. Considering most of the expansion here is what I'm going to be doing, for all the battle-related materia, I would recommend only keeping the current expansion materia and the previous ones. You could cut it down to just the present expansion's materia, but a lot of times I just use the old materia in leveling gear or for jobs that I don't play and won't be using for high-level endgame content. So the rest of the older materia for the battle classes, I either sell or just NPC and throw away. For the crafter and gatherer materia, I always keep all of it. I know that sounds a bit contradictory to cleaning up, but sometimes they're needed for the final overmelds on the crafting or gathering sets, and some of the low-level materia gets extremely overpriced if they're recommended for the best in slot lists. Ultimately, it's going to come down to what materia you're likely to use. If you're not, just sell it. Maybe you don't have a class that's ever going to use that type of materia. Just sell it. Next on the list of my recommended things to check out is your crafting materials. These are going to be similar to the suggestions for the NPC bot here. Remember the shop selling price text when hovering over an item? Well, check for that first. I personally just sell anything that isn't over 25k, but you should come up with a value that matches how much gil you have in the bank and are willing to part with in relation to any future items. Take into consideration that a lot of the items from Stormblood, Heavensward, or Realm Reborn are available for purchase at NPCs around their related expansions. Some players I've spoken with even dispose of any item that isn't from the current expansion when cleaning up. However, very often SE reuses past expansions' crafting materials for the current expansion's craft, which is why I tend to keep at least the previous expansion's materials. From this point on, there's only one thing I would keep in mind for cleaning up your inventory, and that's the market board. My general rule is if an item will not be used during your current expansion or will decrease in value in the future due to availability, I would just sell it. This is probably my personal biggest problem with keeping up with selling items, but if you're able to do it, you'll probably come out ahead in most cases because a lot of items devalue. There are some rare cases that an item may increase in value, but most of the time that is specifically related to rare items that are easier to farm in the current expansion when content is relevant. A good example of this would be some mounts, minions, and equipment from Eureka. Just try to keep all that in mind. So how's your inventory doing? Is it any better? I'm guessing it's probably not, because let's be honest, one of the biggest problems with any MMO player is being a hoarder or a loot goblin. The best thing you can do sometimes, just do a bit of spring cleaning. Personally, I try to do my best to do it at least once a patch, but the grave reality is I just can't keep it clean no matter what I do. So, do you have any advice on keeping your inventory clean? Maybe I missed something that would be helpful to others? Drop it in the comments and let us know. And if this was useful to you, or you just liked the video, I'd really appreciate it if you guys could hit the subscribe button or put a like on the video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you'd like to check out more of my content, you can stop on by my Twitch at twitch.tv/KaiyokoStar, or if you want to join my Discord community, you can also check out the link in the description. Later.